So I briefly introduced this before we meditated, but I want to go over it again, and I won't read the introduction, but I will allude to it before I read the sutta. The Buddha taught one meditation method, and he taught this meditation method as right meditation for his entire 45-year teaching career. He never taught any other type of meditation method. He taught different mindfulness practices, but those were taught, we went over these recently, in the Satipatthana and the Anapanasati Sutta, not as meditation practice, but a way of applying the concentration that's developed in right meditation. And it is that type of mindfulness, refined mindfulness, that leads to insight. Shamatha means a tranquil mind. Vipassana means to insight. So the name of the meditation method that I give it, and some other people give it, is Shamatha-Vipassana. But like I said before, the Buddha never labeled his meditation as anything. He never called it anything but meditation. He was very clear about what that meant. So there was no reason to give it a label. If you were practicing what an awakened human being taught, you practiced this meditation method. In other words, you meditated. Meditation this is what you did. The reason why the names are significant, though, is that the meditation method first uses mindfulness of the breath to begin to calm the mind. And as the mind calms, it becomes more concentrated. And from that well-concentrated mind, useful insight can arise. But it's a very specific insight. It's insight to the three marks of existence, which the Buddha described as the environment that ignorance of what truly constitutes a self is established in and is maintained, resulting in ongoing dukkha. The three marks of existence are impermanent, the not self-characteristic or anatta, and the resulting suffering. And that is the very specific insight that the Buddha's entire Dhamma is designed to do. The reason why I'm emphasizing this point a little bit, and I'm not disparaging anything. I always have to qualify. I'm not disparaging any other teachings or lineage at all, only to make the point and to show respect to what an awakened human being taught and the brilliance of this teachings. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to shine a light on what the Buddha didn't teach, even though it's common today. The Buddha ultimately taught mindfulness, that we should be mindful of what is present, what is occurring, but as equally important, to be mindful of what is not present. And ultimately, to be mindful of what is not present, an awakened human being is mindful that there's no more ignorance left in its own mind. And if we engage in strategies that continue to ignore our own ignorance, we can never get there. And so the Buddha taught these two components, Shamatha and Vipassana, must be a part of any useful meditation practice and as part of the entire Eightfold Path. If you put too much emphasis on Shamatha or Shamatha, meaning what I mean by that is just engaging in a meditation practice that is just that, a very spare. I'm just going to meditate. I'm going to focus on my breath, and it's often done with such severe intensity. I've been on sessions, long meditation sessions, where people are literally shaking and sweat is dripping off because they're so intense on maintaining the breath. And that's the entire practice. It's called something that came out of the Yogacara school. It's going way back, which means the mind-only school. That all that you need to do is to get into the depths of your mind, and somehow you'll be released from whatever you're looking to get released from. Again, the Buddha never taught just meditation. His very first teaching, he established the path as an eightfold path. And those that do not want to follow the Buddha's teachings but want to do something else and maybe call it Buddhism, usually either diminish or completely discount the Eightfold Path. And so you might just practice meditation and you think you're good to go. Or what is much more common today, and I think even more damaging than that, is to just practice, to make your practice focused on solely being compassionate. We know that a mind that is rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths cannot truly be compassionate because it's lacking the wisdom of an awakened human being. Prior to the Buddha's awakening, he referred to himself as an unawakened bodhisattva, which means that he had this great compassion as a human being for other human beings, but he was lacking the wisdom of Four Noble Truths, which is what he awakened to. So that the long introduction. So a proper and useful and effective meditation practice will be able to calm the mind, leading to this useful insight. And as I said earlier, my talk yesterday on the Yoganada Sutta is very similar to this. And this is another one. This has a wonderful story attached to it, though. Let me just read it. Two monks of the Buddhist sangha were talking. One asked the other, to what extent is one's vision said to be well purified? Well, when one knows as it actually is the origination and the passing away of the sixth sense base, it is to this extent that one's vision is said to be well pure. The sixth sense base is well purified. The sixth sense base is simply our five physical senses and that sixth sense of consciousness or intellect. But we have to remember that in the context of the Buddhist teachings, that is ongoing thinking. That type of consciousness is ongoing thinking that is rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. So that type of thinking can only use the senses, the five other senses, to reinforce its ignorance. It makes sense, doesn't it?
Define ignorance.
You've asked me that before. It's very specific ignorance. It's ignorance of, or not knowing, ignorance of anything. Not knowing how to wash a dog properly is ignorance of how to wash a dog. Not knowing how to drive a car, you're ignorant of that. It's not a slur, even though it's often used that way. So the Buddha was very specific in using this term. He wasn't saying that human beings are patently ignorant, because then we'd have no opportunity to awaken, isn't it? He simply said that the problem of ignorance as it relates to the Dhamma is ignorance of Four Noble Truths, meaning we just don't know what they are. Awakening is gaining understanding or wisdom of Four Noble Truths. So again, it's that very specific aspect of ignorance. And you asked this question a few times, and I'm glad you do. I'm not saying please don't ask it. It's so important. It's such an important question. It gives me the opportunity to make that point again and again. I've been writing a series of, writing a rather long article that uses 3 separate suttas on dukkha as it relates to ignorance. So one of these days I'll complete it. And, I'll teach it here. Dedicated. It's already there. But does that explanation help you?
No, I just think it's really good to keep that in front of me, because initially I was kind of insulted that, well, they think I'm not, they think I'm ignorant. But to know that, I mean, now through meditation, I definitely see, how much of my life was spent in ignorance. I didn't know any better. Yeah, and if you had understanding of Four Noble Truths, you would have been having a much more peaceful and calm life, which is the point of the Buddhist teaching. And in order to really understand that, for anybody, for this crazy old man to throw out the word ignorance and say you're ignorant, that's why you got problems, that's gonna create more upset, isn't it, and frustration. But that's not what I'm saying, and I hope I'm more clear. But again, thank you for drawing that out. The Buddha awakened to dependent origination, another one of the most misunderstood and misapplied teachings of all time, that simply states from ignorance of Four Noble Truths, and it concludes with all manner of suffering arises. It's very clear what the Buddha is teaching. And then he taught, his very first teaching was the Four Noble Truths, to establish that as the antidote to ignorance. And when those two things are misunderstood, misapplied, or completely ignored, what do? We're only ignoring our own ignorance. The Buddha taught that very narrow path. The Eightfold Path is a very narrow, well-focused path that he called the middle way because it avoids those extreme views that are rooted in ignorance. He understood in his brilliance that we needed a path to wade through all the distractions that ignorance brings to us. And again, that is the brilliance of the man. And for 45 years, he taught that very simple and direct path out of great compassion, married with great wisdom, because he knew the common human problem. And the longer I teach, the more I've been involved in the true Dhamma, meaning what the Buddha actually taught. It's astonishing how powerful and how pervasive and how subtle the strategies that we all create as human beings to continue to ignore our own ignorance. And that is the primary problem with what has developed since the Buddha's passing. But there was even a push during the Buddha's time to alter the teachings to fit wrong views rather than accept our own ignorance.
I can't remember the gentleman's name right now, but he heard that the Buddha was about to pass. He was an older man, but he wasn't an elder in understanding. He had kind of just started studying with the Buddha. And he was overjoyed to hear that the Buddha was going to pass. Why? Because he says, now we can practice the way we want to practice. That's the arrogance, that kind of arrogance that leads to further ignorance. Now I can do what I want. The Buddha taught this very simple path that anybody could do with one catch. You have to do it the way it's explained to you. Yeah. It's like if you want to learn how to change the oil in a car, it's not going to do you any good to go to baking school, is it? You might learn something that's wonderful to use, and you can make some great cakes, but somebody asks you to change the oil, you're in trouble. The same is true with this. You can practice anything and call it anything you want, even call it Buddhism, but if it's not this, you're not going to learn how to awaken as a human being awakened.
I don't think the Buddha ever claimed to not be ignorant either. So
he did, referring to himself prior to his awakening.
Exactly.
In fact, there's a great sutta that we use a lot now called the Nagara Sutta. It's on the website, and I encourage you to read it. It's where the Buddha explains clearly and explicitly the results of his own ignorance and how he gets caught in this feedback loop of self-referential views rooted in ignorance and bouncing off that consciousness, that thinking rooted in that ignorance. And it's a remarkable sutta.
I feel like it's whether or not we can truly admit it in ourselves.
Yeah. You know. And Sam, it's like, I won't, now that I mentioned your name, I won't say it on tape. Well, I don't want to take license with that. It's like any problem that we have in life. Until we can admit that it's an actual problem, no matter what it is, there's no way that we can actually change it, can we? Because if we don't see it as a true problem, then we're going to just continue to defend it and harbor it within ourselves, because now it's something that we own and we're not going to let go of. And we know what that's like.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I'll read that last sentence again. It is to this extent, and one's vision is called, I didn't even read that yet. So let me go back one sentence. When one knows, as it actually is, the origination and the passing away of the sixth sense base, it is to this extent that one's vision is said to be well purified. Dissatisfied with this answer, he asked another monk the same question. Look at the pattern here. He didn't like that clear and direct and Dhamma-based answer. So he's looking for another answer that will allow him to reaffirm his own ignorance. And he gets this answer. When one knows, as it actually is, the origination and the passing away of the five clinging aggregates, it is to this extent that one's vision is said to be well purified. Of course, the five clinging aggregates are simply another way of referring to the same subject. But these are different aspects of the Buddha's teachings here too. Still dissatisfied, he asks another monk the same question. The answer is, when one knows, as it actually is, the origination and the passing away of the four great elements of earth, fire, wind, and water, it is to this extent that one's vision is said to be well purified. Those four elements are what the Buddha refers to as being identified with form, with physical form. But it's also a component of five clinging aggregates. Five clinging aggregates are form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications, and ongoing ignorant consciousness rooted in ignorance. Still part of that whole misunderstanding of what constitutes a self. Still dissatisfied, guess what he does? He asks another monk the same question. When one knows, as it actually is, that all conditioned things are subject to cessation. That's what Kandana declared when he awakened. It is to this extent that one's vision is said to be well purified. Still dissatisfied, he seeks the Buddha. He tells him of the answers to these questions. In reading the suttas, this is when I really started understanding the brilliance of this human being, but also the commonality of his brilliance. It's rooted in humanity. It's not rooted outside of humanity. The Buddha replies, friends, it's as if a man had never seen a certain tree that changes appearance often, a difficult to describe tree, a riddle tree. He would ask someone to describe a riddle tree. They say that this tree is black as a burnt stump. This is how the tree looked at the time that they saw it. Dissatisfied with this answer, they ask another to describe the same riddle tree. They tell him that this tree has no bark and its pods explode. This is how the tree looked at the time. He's describing how we acquire views based on experience, but lacking an overall understanding of what's right in front of us. Dissatisfied with this answer, they ask another to describe the riddle tree. They tell him that this tree has thick foliage with dense shade. Of course, this is how the tree looked at the time. The Buddha continues, in this same way, what these people of integrity are focused on when their vision became well purified is what they answered. So in other words, these other monks had awakened, and the significant teaching that inspired them towards awakening is what they most hold in mind. And so the Buddha is also teaching something here. You don't have to get every single sutta. And you don't have to memorize dependent origination. You don't have to do any of those things. You just have to open yourself to the Dhamma and allow yourself to be inspired towards awakening. That's the true meaning of a spiritual practice, not something magical or mystical. The root of spirit, the Latin root, is in spirito. In spirito, it means we're inspired by something. And now we get to be inspired by something that we know leads to awakening. True spiritual practice. Suppose, friend, that there was a royal front, the Buddha is continuing, using another metaphor. Suppose, friends, that there were a royal frontier fortress with strong walls and ramparts and 6 gates. In it would be a wise, experienced, intelligent gatekeeper to keep out those he didn't know and to let in those he did. A swift pair of messengers coming from the east would say to the gatekeeper, "Where, my good man, is the commander of this fortress?" He would say, "There he is, sir, sitting in the central square." The central square is metaphor for becoming within. "There he is, sir, sitting in the central square." The swift pair of messengers delivering their accurate report to the commander of the fortress would then go back by the route at which they had come. Then a swift pair of messengers coming from the west or from the north or the south would say to the gatekeeper, "Where, my good man, is the commander of this fortress?" He would say, "There he is, sir, sitting in the central square." The swift pair of messengers delivering their accurate report to the commander of the fortress would then go back by the route by which they had come. The Buddha continues, "I have given you this simile, friend, to convey a message, and the message is this. The fortress stands for this body, composed of the 4 elements, born of mother and father." He's describing an ordinary human being. Born of mother and father, nourished with rice and barley gruel. Again, a normal, ordinary human being. Nothing special, nobody exalted, nobody born into royalty or special classes. Again, the significance of this during the Buddha's time, and it's very similar to Indian society, is the caste system, which is still present. In India at that time, unless you were part of the 2 upper classes, for one thing, you were prevented from hearing anything such as a spiritual teaching, and it was impossible. It was taught that it was impossible for you, if you were one of the lower classes, to awaken. It just wasn't possible. And it was technically, it was illegal to do what we were doing here. You couldn't teach the Dhamma. The Buddha never let that stop. He taught everyone. Born of mother and father, nourished with rice and barley gruel, subject to constant rubbing and abrasion, to breaking and falling apart. The 6 gates stand for the 6 internal sense media. The gatekeeper stands for mindfulness. The swift pair of messengers stands for, guess what? Tranquility and insight, Shamatha and Vipassana. Meaning how necessary they are to deliver the right message to the central square. The commander of the fortress stands for consciousness. So that same consciousness that's rooted in ignorance is the same consciousness that awakens. We don't leave the body. We don't leave our minds. We work with what we are. Why? Because we're human beings. The Buddha taught how human beings can awaken. The central square stands for the 4 great elements, the earth property, the liquid property, the fire property, and the wind property, simply our bodies and all physicality. The accurate report stands for unbinding, meaning nibbana. It's an accurate report that leads us to awakening. The route by which they come stands for the Noble Eightfold Path. Notice how the Buddha used that simile of the different directions, but they all followed the path coming through the different gates. Again, reinforcing the importance of the Eightfold Path. No matter what direction, meaning no matter where you start from, if you want to get to the central square, you follow this Eightfold Path. And then he describes the Noble Eightfold Path of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation. That's the end of the sutta. I have some more commentary after that, but that's really the perfect place to end that sutta. Thank you. for letting me share that with you. The two significant things, and I think it's obvious, but I'll say it anyway, is the Buddha's teaching how important a right meditation is within that framework of the Eightfold, within the framework of the Eightfold Path. And that if we're going to get to the central square of awakening, it's through that one path. And it's the only path the Buddha ever taught, and it's the only meditation the Buddha ever taught. And if you think about, and I said this a little bit earlier, this brilliance of this human being who recognized the common human problem of ignorance of Four Noble Truths, he seriously considered after his awakening, how can I teach this in a way that would pierce that common veil of ignorance? How can I say this? How can I present this in a way that would get through that common ignorance, knowing what he now knew, described in the Nagara Sutta, of the incredibly powerful and subtle strategies we all create to ignore our own ignorance. Another way of saying that, of recognizing ignorance of Four Noble Truths, is that a deluded mind. How is a mind that is deluded know that it's deluded? It needs some way of seeing it, doesn't it? Or it's just continually reinforcing its own delusion or its own ignorance. That's the Eightfold Path. It develops the refined mindfulness to recognize in ourselves and abandon that ignorance. So a simple meditation method within the simple Eightfold Path delivers us to awakening. And another important point that the Buddha is making here, and that I continually make, it's in this present lifetime that we can awaken, as long as we develop an Eightfold Path. If we allow ourselves to be distracted by our own ignorance, meaning substituting or even adding things to this, we're not likely to develop it. But if we do, if we take to the Dhamma wholeheartedly, and we've all seen this in this sangha too, if we take to the Dhamma wholeheartedly, we make very quick and very substantial changes in our lives. And it's those changes that give us the foundation, but also the maintenance of right intention to continue. We know it's working. Again, the Buddha said, "Ehepasiku, come and see for yourself." One more thing that I want to say, because Liz brought up a really good point on Tuesday night, and she said that sometimes this teaching sounds dogmatic. And then she followed by saying she's had the experience to know that they're not. But it often can sound like that because we're so conditioned, especially those that might have been involved in religions and turned away from them because of the dogmatic presentation. But we have to understand what dogma means. Dogma means taking an authoritarian position on something that has no foundation. There's nothing dogmatic about the Buddha's teachings, because he never said follow it because I say so. He says this is something that you can experience for yourself, and hence there's the foundation. It's within us, not somewhere outside of us. We're not taking anything on faith. Ehepasiku, come and see for yourself. So you got two sermons tonight. Thank you. I'm going to ask Sam for, you know how we go around the room and ask. So, and nobody has to say anything. But what did you think about the class tonight? Was it useful?
I think it was like way more than useful. Each callback, I was kind of like thinking, like, where am I at in this meditation? Like, where am I at with meditation, with this breathing, and breathing out the feelings and everything, and thoughts, and first callback, my mind was everywhere, and then I was like, well, how about I work on the posture and the breath itself? And then I started to go too crazy with it, too extreme with the breathing and holding it, and breathing out and holding it. But it helped me to, because I think I was holding back a lot at first. I was kind of I was nervous. I was very anxious, and I was kind of laughing. And then I cried a little bit, and then because I'm all over the place right now, But
yeah.
That's why I say it was more than useful, because by the last callback, I was bringing in, and I was starting to relax and just get back into the feeling what it's like to be mindful, I guess.
Yeah.
And
that's it. Yeah.
like I recognize the feeling, you know, and it feels right, and it feels like what I need to do, you know. And the talk afterwards, you know, I kind of have my distracted moments, but I'm so grateful that you do this and you have these talks, even if this is not the beginner class or whatever. I still feel like I can definitely take everything that you said and hold it and take it with me. So, you know, I'm definitely going to try to make it Saturday too.
That'd be great. Sam, thank you so much. Give yourself an awful lot of credit because you show some really useful insight. You're able to observe what's the essence of this practice is being able to observe what's going on within you. And you just described that beautifully. And the progression from a distracted mind to now a calm and peaceful mind is the essence of the Dhamma. And the point there is that the beginning part of your meditation, when you describe yourself as all over the place, is just as useful as the conclusion of your meditation. Yeah. Why? Because that's what's occurring.
And everything in between, because
everything in between.
Everything in between is the best part too, is because it's like the journey. You know, it's like the process of, like, you know, it's like the morning, and it's like the regurgitation, and it's everything, and you're figuring it out, you know, and you're finding out something. You're coming to a conclusion.
You got me. I'm jumping off my cushion here. Yeah, and it's all when you look at it that way. It's the whole practice is valuable because it is. Why? Yeah. Because this is what's occurring to you.
Yeah.
And it is within you that awakening occurs. You have a remarkable ability to stay present with that. Thank you so much. One thing that I would give you, and I don't want to hold back your desire to meditate. If you're reinvigorating a practice, it's best to kind of go back to the beginning and start with shorter periods of time, but up until you're comfortable. If you're comfortable with 20 minutes, do that. But if it seems like a stretch when you're on your own, 3, 4, 5 minutes is fine to get started again. And if you can do that twice a day or 3 times a day, and then gradually add time. But don't let that hold you back. If you want to do 20 minutes or more, that's fine too. It's good to see you. Kevin, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for bringing this guy too.
But I did. So, and, you know, just sort of following on to that, I mean, even if you've been meditating like for a while, or a little while like I have, you can get those big moments of distraction. You know, a week during my trip that I took recently and following that, so distracted and so filled with thoughts and reflections about what was going on that it was very hard to focus, very hard to stay on my breath. And now that passed somewhat this week, I found I was getting into very deep portion of meditation, and it was great. So this talk reinforces how that needs to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is. It's just like that, isn't it? Did you happen to listen to, I think it was last Saturday's class? Because Lorna was so impressed by what you talked about. Oh, and I'm saying maybe I shouldn't go into too much detail, but how you abstained in Paris, and what a powerful level of mindfulness that is. It shows. It really impressed her and impressed me. I think impressed everyone. Thank you for that. Diane, good to see you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for teaching. Thank you for your steadfast being here. I kind of have 2 things. I was talking to Matt today, the acupuncturist, and I was kind of saying something to him about, you know, how do you teach children? And he said, you don't need to teach children because children have that they can tell when someone is being dishonest. They
Yeah.
can tell when something is wrong. And I just so resonated with that because an example was when I was 5 years old, my dad passed a school bus that was stopped. And of course, he got pulled over, and I knew it was wrong when he was going around the school bus, and the kids were all out there and everything. And I knew it was wrong, and I kept thinking, how can Daddy do this? How can my daddy do this? And there were times, even when I was a teenager, when I remembered thinking, how come they're letting me get away with this? Why doesn't somebody put a stop to it? You know, slam me against the wall and say, behave, kind of thing, because I knew. And then my son and I just recently went through this thing. He kind of grew up with me telling them about how my mother and father liked my brother better than they liked me. And then my son was starting to tell me that I liked Brooke better than I liked him. And now he has 2 children. Hallelujah for that, because he finally figured out that there's no way that you can love one child more than the other. And it's not in the same way. Nobody, loves anybody in the exact same way, kind of thing. And what I'm trying to say with all this is, I think the thing why I keep harping on this ignorance thing is, so much of my conditioned thinking was because I was immature. I didn't know any better. That I had developed these, this thing like mom likes this mother's brothers is what keeps mom always liked you best kind of thing. And where it continues to put me down. And one of the things that I do like about the program is when I came in there, the first day I came in to the Al-Anon part of it, they said, God didn't make junk. And I really liked that because I didn't really know that at the time. But anyway, the more I meditate, and it's not easy to continue to meditate. It is, I think it's not for the faint of heart. And I think sometimes people should know that because the stuff that comes up from within the body, the mind, whatever, needs to be felt and let go. And that's the whole point of it. That's where we get healthy, body, mind, and spirit. And but it's not easy.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of my main resistance to meditation is it's like going to your parent. I mean, I can feel the immaturity of it. It's like, oh, I'm going to have to go to my parents and talk to them again. Do I have to do that? Do I have to behave, kind of thing? And I'm going to be done here in a second, but the thing about the resistance that I find most often, most interesting is when I'm angry at someone, when someone pulls in front of me traffic-wise, or when something happens to just disturb me, it's the same sensation of resisting meditation. It's my immaturity. And that's why I keep coming back.
I'm glad you keep coming back. And that's why, to me, the best and usable explanation of what awakening means is full human maturity, because that's just what we're describing. That's just what the Buddha taught. And that the difficulty of what comes up in meditation, the Buddha addressed immediately in his teachings in the Satipatthana Sutta. That the Satipatthana Sutta teaches us what to do during meditation. We first become mindful of the breath in the body, the first foundation of mindfulness, then to be mindful of feelings arising and passing away, like the instructions in meditation that I give. And then to be mindful of thoughts arising and passing away, because that's what occurs. And then to finally, that fourth foundation of mindfulness is to just be mindful of the present quality of our mind, no matter how it is. So, and in meditation, feelings arise that might get us agitated or whatever. It feels like we're processing a bunch of stuff. The Buddha reminds us that it's temporary. Let it go, as you described, and notice that it has affected your quality of your mind in a certain way. If you end up with an agitated mind, it's okay. You would understand. Many people think it's crazy to say this. You can learn to be at peace with a less than peaceful mind. That's kind of the essence of meditation, isn't it? To gain control of our thinking again, no matter what's occurring. And it works directly.
Contrary to the world.
Yeah, but that was the Buddha and to this day I'll say it, he was the greatest radical thinker of all time, because everything that he taught was contrary to what everybody else, all the spiritual teachers were teaching, and I would say that still continues to today. But it was the way of life that he depicted was contrary to the way everybody was living their life, and I would say that's up till today. He put aside all the competitiveness and the need to acquire things, the need for status and power and wealth and prestige and all of that. So all that's a big trap. Now, he never said that it's wrong to live in the world and maybe have a nice hut, maybe know where your next. That's okay. But when we start creating identities, look how great I am, then we're in trouble. We've set the trap for ourselves and we got caught in our own trap. That's the essence of ignorance. That's what he's teaching here. So what a great class. So thank you. Any questions about this, what we talked about tonight? So the next Thursday is the first Thursday of the month, and so there'll be a beginner's class. And then moving forward, at least for the next couple months, we'll see how things develop. The only class on Thursday will be that first Thursday of every month beginner's class. The rest of the schedule stays the same. There'll be a class every Tuesday evening and Saturday morning. I'll put this in the email, and it's on the website now already, I think.
Just once a month on Thursdays then?
First Thursday of every month.
Okay.
Yeah, and also just to remind everybody that the third Saturday of every month, right here at 10:30, right after our Saturday class, Matt is teaching Qigong, and as most of us have experienced, it's just a great enhancement to our Dhamma practice, especially coming from Matt, because he really has a profound understanding of the Dhamma married with the wisdom of the Tao, and that's very rare. So if you have a chance, just a great addition. I think that's all for tonight. We'll finish as we always do with the Karaniya Metta Sutta. So again, find your relaxed meditation posture and gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And again, become mindful of the sensation of your in-breath and your out-breath. And these are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class. Thank you online too. Peace.